Welcome to Paranormal Roundtable, PRT for short. My name is Josh Turner. People call me Wolf. This is my co-host Tony. People call him Tony, but he calls himself
Mushu. Which I don't like that you introduced me like that. I would like to believe that other people call me Mushu.
Well, you can believe what you want.
Okay, thanks.
Believe in one hand and crap in the other and see which one you get first. So,
Jeez.
I'm just playing with you.
I believe I can crap in one hand, so I got both.
That's great. That's awesome.
I'm keeping my options open in that one hand, all right?
At least you've accomplished something in your life. You've heard it here, folks. He craps in his hands. So, DasWolfman88@gmail.com, DasWolfman88@gmail.com. That is the email address.
Yeah, if you have any stories, please send it to us.
Please send it to us. PRTpodcast.com
is our website.
And go to PRTpodcast.com. Hopefully we have everything on there that's been updated or whatever.
Yeah, the shows and the art gallery, and a link to our merch store. And please, if you want to support us in any way, just
give me money. No, just kidding.
No,
if you want to support us, buy a shirt or a hoodie or a mug.
Yeah.
There's phone.
That way you get something out of it.
Yeah, you get something out of it, and you support the show. If you don't want any merchandise, we have stickers too. Everybody should at least buy a sticker. You got to have a sticker for your computer. Come on. And then put them in random places and
just tag
bathrooms.
Tag up the world with our stickers.
Here you go, PRT. You better watch it, boy.
Mm.
Yeah. So, anyways, everybody needs to go out and buy our merchandise and just promote the heck out of it all over the place. That's what we need to do. I'll be happy when I see every single person walking around with a PRT shirt on.
Yeah, in fact, if you're going to buy those stickers, just start smacking them on the backs of people so that they support us anyway.
They're going to start finding them littering the streets, folks. Littering the streets. So, anyways, we have a very special guest tonight. Obviously, if you read the
title, you're going to know.
I'm sure it's going to be on there, so it's not a big surprise. Very, very intriguing and iconic author. This whole Dogman thing really got going because of her efforts to put the information out there, to lay the groundwork for people to be able to go and read about it. I know that's one of the first things that I found, to read, to kind of get a feel for what was going on with this whole weird phenomena. And so that's who we're interviewing tonight.
Of course, Linda Godfrey,
Linda Godfrey,
prolific author of over 18 books. It's 18 books. I don't want to say over because I think she has 18 exactly. Now you're over here making up numbers you don't even know. Well, it is 18, and it's yeah.
Well, anyways, without further ado, we're gonna bring Linda Godfrey on before Tony just babbles and says some other crazy stuff.
Yabba do.
So. That being said and blabbered, Linda Godfrey is our guest. So what we're going to do for this show special, we're going to be giving away a special DVD and a book, one of her autographed books. How you're going to be able to be a part of that? How you're going to be able to
join the raffle? Basically,
join in on the raffle
is basically just like I'm going to post on the Paranormal Roundtable group on Facebook, the actual show link, and if you want to comment on that link, we'll choose one person at random to be able to receive the giveaway, which we're pretty excited about.
We use an impartial third person who has no desire to be a part of what we're doing at all. Scorpion. We'll just let him point because he never participates unless he's coming on the show to talk.
Yep.
So that's it. So we'll have somebody that'll go up there and just say, "Hey, I picked that person." And you guys, if you go to the Paranormal Roundtable where we post the link to the show, you know how it works, okay? Just go over there and post. We'll post it, and then you make a comment, and then we'll read your comment. And as long as it's not too stupid,
as long as it's praising us,
there are no stupid comments, just stupid people. So anyway, stupid people, okay? All you stupid people, go over there. I'm just kidding. We love you all. Get on there and comment and hit like, whatever, and we will pick somebody, and you will have an autographed book and DVD from Linda Godfrey.
Yep. And without further ado, let's just get right into the interview.
Yep. Hey, Linda, are you there?
I am.
Hey, so everybody, this is Linda Godfrey. you really
you already know who it is.
Need no introduction. But so do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. Well, I guess I'm a lifelong Wisconsinite. Before I searched for unusual creatures, I was an art teacher and a journalist for 10 years for a newspaper. That's how I found out about the original Beast of Bray Road, and that was in 1991 that I started. So it's been kind of a long, strange trip, and we can talk about whatever part of that trip you'd like to.
Absolutely. So but when we were talking earlier, Linda, we were talking about how we just wanted to have a discussion here, but there's so many questions that I have, and I'm sure you've been asked these all a million times before, but I'll just start with that. The Beast of Bray Road, that was your introduction to the whole Dogman phenomena, right?
Right. I didn't know there was such a thing as a Dogman, and I still am not sure exactly what it is. It's something, that I know. There's just too many of them and too many concrete examples of their motions and effects and things like that. And over all these years and over all the contacts I've had from people really all around the world, it's not just one little road in southern Wisconsin. I learned that right away. It's all over the U.S., Canada, South America, and Europe, and probably other countries that don't have the same language, speak the same language, and aren't aware, that we have it here too. So I know that there's something to it, and I probably would not have if I had not just gotten the job at this newspaper in late 1991, and was working with a local county animal control officer about several other different things, which in retrospect seems sort of creepy too. One of the things we were looking at illegal dog trapping, and about finding grocery bags full of mutilated dog bodies and carcasses in different spots around the county. And that was kind of what prompted me to ask him if he'd ever heard anything about this rumor that had just been given to me by a lady that I kind of knew, not real well, a school bus driver who heard it, that she said people were seeing what they said looked like a werewolf or some kind of wolf or German shepherd that walked and ran and jumped and leaped on its hind legs, used its forepaws like hands, had a face and a muzzle like a German shepherd with tall pointy ears on top of the head. It had a long tail, so it wasn't Bigfoot. It also walked on its toe pads like a canine, which isn't Bigfoot, but covered with fur and acting just sort of oddly. And we decided to go ahead and do the story on it. There's a long form and a short form. I'm giving you just the short form of it now. And I would say it went viral, except there was no internet at that time as we know it now. It went national, was what we said then, because it hit the Associated Press and they sent it to all the coasts. And pretty soon we had radio and TV from not just the local Wisconsin stations, but West Coast, East Coast, you name it. And it just sort of took off from there and really has never stopped since.
Now, I remember either I read it or I saw it in a documentary or a video, and it was you said that you saw a police file that was labeled werewolf. Is that correct?
That was actually that animal control officer. I was in his office discussing these other stories that we were working on, and that's when I kind of gathered up my courage. I thought, well, I'll never know if I don't ask him. So I said, do you know about this thing they're talking about out on Bray Road? And he looked at me, then he opened up his file drawer in his official desk, in his official office of Walworth County, and pulled out the manila file folder, and on the little tab it said werewolf. Now, when you've got a county official with a file folder in his desk at work labeled werewolf, that's news. You have to tell people that. I mean, because any number of things could be affected. And I was thinking that it was probably something like a sick big dog, or I mean, wolves do go through here occasionally, but not usually, but it could, or a wolf that maybe something was wrong with its forepaws, had to run on its hind legs, because that does happen with mammals. And walking on your hind legs is not a supernatural activity, even if you're not supposed to do it. Almost any mammal can, if it's motivated or has some reason. And then I thought, well, and maybe there's this eerie aspect to it. Maybe it'll just be local folklore and I should record it. I had all kinds of reasons for thinking it really should be told. It shouldn't just be stuffed back in this guy's desk drawer and no one ever hear of it. Maybe someone could solve what it was. I was not thinking in terms of myself going out and solving it, although it wasn't long before people were asking me to go and do that. I've got pictures of me. I was hired by the Sun magazine to go and buy a supermarket chicken and just kind of sit out and put it in a ditch on Bray Road and sit and watch it. And so the newspaper photographer, and I both did that, and nothing, of course, came. And it was still sitting there the next day. Well, when you've got a car sitting right there, nothing in its right mind is going to come and bother you. So it didn't prove much. But that was really the first time, and I really love the field work. That's my favorite thing. And I do quite a fair amount of it. But, it's the same old thing that happens. You take photos, you think you've got a great shot, and nothing shows up, or it's gray. The trail cams don't work. Nothing electronic that you bring works, as happens in just about any search for any of the cryptid animals. So, I'm still in that vein of looking for it. I have seen Bigfoot more than once in that sort of setting, but it took 20 years until that happened. So it's, not a quick thing, not an overnight thing at all. And I never expected back then in 1991, 92 that I would still have anything to do with such a thing, in my later years. So here I am.
And that's crazy. So long story short, the guy goes to the bathroom, you steal the file and run out, and then you tell everybody that there's a werewolf crisis.
No, not quite. No, he made copies of what was in the file. Was contact information and short statements from the people who had been calling him and coming to see him because they were seeing this thing and they were worried that there was some kind of wild animal that they had to protect their kids and livestock from, and they wanted to know what it was, and he didn't know, so he was just writing the names and contact information down. And that was when I thought to myself, I was suspecting hoax or something like that because it's just too unbelievable. But I thought, well, what kind of hoaxer gets himself or herself and 5 or 10 other people to give their contact information and their real address and their phone number in case they do something, they could be immediately traced, and maybe they would get some sort of penalty for fraud, or I don't know what you charge somebody with. But it can be dangerous for people to do that too, and it's happened in other states that people have gotten hit and killed by cars while they were trying to impersonate a monster, that sort of thing. So, but it just struck me that, well, there's something to this. At least I've got all these contacts. I can call them, and talk to them personally. And that's what I did. I went and met up with most of them personally and decided they seemed real. They seemed like they were from all walks of life, women, men, blue collar, white collar, all different kinds of jobs, professional, non-professional. I had one guy with very high clearance from the Milwaukee airport who had seen it 4 times and was really reticent, but his relatives goaded him into talking about it. So it just was too wide a group of people. I had so much information on them, nothing that any of them said, with the exception of one possibility, a teenage boy. They're usually kind of the suspect if anything's going on. But otherwise, I had nothing from any of them to make me think they were pulling some kind of a trick or, trying to, I don't know. There was nothing that made me suspect the others. And so, as crazy as the whole thing seemed, the story and the reporting, I think, were pretty solid. I just repeated what they said and gave a couple of suggestions and then let people make up their own minds. And that's sort of been my MO ever since. I always say I try to keep my reporter's hat on at least some of the time, because there's always a, hey, but maybe it. And those words I always like to have appear. So, and I don't have an agenda. If it were found out tomorrow that it was just some weird new dog hybrid that had been around that long and it was solved, I'd be happy. If it's never solved, there's nothing I can do about it. There's lots of things I'll never know about, so I just kind of, put it in the don't worry bowl. So it doesn't. I really don't have an agenda for it. I never have had one, and it's just been I think it's still of interest to me and to many people.
Okay, so all these decades later, Okay. This was 30 years ago, really? Pretty much 30, like 29, 30 years ago?
Something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so what do you think it is? I mean, like to this day, do you have any
I wish I knew.
you just don't have any like solid, I mean, okay, because like in your books, and you've written, I believe, 17 of them. Is that correct?
Well, 18 including a fantasy novel.
Okay. All right. I'm behind.
Oh,
Okay.
that's okay. It's been a couple years since that's been out too, and you can find the page for that on lindagodfrey.com. But I generally don't talk about it along with it's a different sort of thing, than the nonfiction.
Well, I was going to say actually that I was actually interested in that. It's called God Johnson. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I read the intro because when Wolf told me that we were going to interview you, I just wanted to go back and double check and make sure I knew everything that you've written. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, wow. Like, it seems like a really good concept. And it seemed really interesting to me, definitely.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've had a lot of good reviews. And I wrote that before Neil Gaiman came out with his God's Book series. I had never, I hadn't gotten mine published yet. And it was sitting in a drawer for some years. And I saw his and I thought, oh no, now everybody will think I copied his. But I did, it was just when things come out, like inventions or books or songs, so often two will come out at the same time or three. And
yeah. Oh,
things
yeah.
that hadn't been done before, I'm sure there's a name for that. But
Synchronicity.
well, that's one. Yeah. It seemed very except I didn't know what it was synchronous with. But
yeah, I mean,
mine
someone's got
has
to
a
have the
very
same
different.
idea at some point, though. And, but I mean, I was reading into it and it's,
mine's different.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to say that it seemed like a very cool concept, and I was actually thinking about purchasing it and reading into that.
I would not stop you.
Well,
Highly encouraged.
you're definitely a prolific author. One of the things I want to say real quick about you, Linda, is that you are you're a very nice and generous person with your time and what you do in this community. You take the time to speak to the fans, and you're a very open person, and you're reachable. Like you're a person that people can talk to. You're not like this iconic author that just kind of hides up in a castle and doesn't let anybody approach. That's another thing I liked about you. Like I reached out to you and we've communicated back and forth for months now trying to coordinate this. You're very busy. I'm very busy. I have a business I run, so it takes up a bulk of my time, but you are always writing, always doing research, and you're a very busy person. So I appreciate that, you coming on and taking the time to talk to us. My fans are very rabid, and they definitely are into this subject. Now, I've read most of your books, and I was going to ask you, just on a personal preference, like if you had to choose one book, is there one that stands out above the others, like as like your best work, or you enjoyed working on it more, or you felt something from it? Because I know which one I like the best.
Well, there are books that I've written that are probably better written, and there are books that have, more in-depth things. But I have to say, my first book on the topic, The Beast of Bray Road, it's just called The Beast of Bray Road, Stalking Wisconsin's Werewolf. And the thing is, it was my second book actually. I wrote a true historical crime first, but then this one came just to kind of break my way into the publisher, and it worked. And then they published this one, but it just I'll go back to it from time to time and realize it's something that I thought was just coming to me now, and nope, it's in that first book. That first book was written because I'd been at the newspaper for 10 years, and I was still getting stuff from people. I was still getting TV and radio programs wanting things, and I didn't really know what I was going to do about it. I felt like something should be done, and so I decided I would write the book and just put everything in there that was pertinent. It's not a scary monster book per se. That's not all that's in it. I wanted to get the reactions of the townspeople and how it changed the people in the town. Other things that happened, there were political incidents. I wanted all that in one spot so people would understand this wasn't just like a lone monster sighting. This was a slice of life from this little small town, American town, that had an invasion of sorts. Not that it was overrun by these upright hairy animals, but just the whole idea of it was sort of an invasion to people's lives, and it was already out there. It was kind of like the the virus that everybody, the OD. Oh no, what? I never say this right. The bad virus that's out there.
COVID-19.
Yeah, COVID-19. Right. It's kind of like that. It was out among everybody before they even knew about it. It was just there, and somebody was going to write about it sooner or later, I'm sure. Maybe not. Maybe it just would have been kicked under the table and hidden somehow. But I really wanted to do that, and I think I sort of succeeded. And as soon as it came out, that whole thing started again. So I knew I hit some kind of nerves. But we're in the second edition on that one because the original publisher went out of business, and so it was republished exactly the same with all the same inside stuff, except I had to pay for the cover this time, and I couldn't get the artist to come down to a price I could afford. So I had my son, who has a college degree from School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and he did a new cover for it. The rest of it is just the same, but I'm still really proud of that first book on it, and I think it has a lot. If anybody really is interested in the topic, it's sort of a must read because you understand many of the things that come later much better.
Lays the groundwork.
Exactly. Perfect. I could have just said that and that would have covered it.
I tell you what, my favorite is Hunting the American Werewolf. I love that book. That one.
Thank you.
Was awesome. I don't know. And it's been so long since I've read it, and I went looking on the shelf to see if I could find it. Now, I have had 2 or 3 different copies of it, and I've made the mistake of lending them out. And one of my buddies is a perpetual book borrower, and I just was like, you know what? And so I got it on I think on a Kindle or whatever. I got a Kindle that I just read with, whatever, and I got it on that, and I can't even find the thing to charge it because I haven't used it in so long. And so I was going to brush back up on it, but I just remember that book, having read it twice. And then, like I said, it's been a while since I've read it, but I just remember it was that one was my favorite right there.
Well, see, that was the one where I sort of branched out and started theorizing, which I think set it apart a little bit. And I really like that book a lot too. I think it's really packed with a lot of stuff that surprises people. I get into a lot of different areas. The sad thing is that it was under the same publisher as the one that did the Beast of Bray Road, and so it's out of print. And I haven't been able to get it to reprint like I did with the Beast of Bray Road. So I'm not sure exactly if that'll come back in. You can find copy. I only have 2 copies, and they're not good ones either, because I didn't know the publisher was going to do that, and it just sort of ended and dumped. That happens so much with publishers. And this was a pretty good publisher. It was well known for historical regional tales and things. So it wasn't one that you would have thought had gone. It was connected with UW-Madison and at one point. So it's just not there. But yeah, if you find one, I'm hoping I'll sometimes there are piles of them that the publisher sent or sold to a second price bookstore, and you can find a clump of them. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for right now, because I would like to get more of them myself.
Well, I'll use my connections from the underworld to see if I can. I'm just kidding. I'll see if I can find some for you, because you never know. Half price books here in Austin's a big deal, and you can find books here that are obscure, because that's actually where I bought, I think, the Michigan Dogman. Actually, I think I found one there, and they had just put it out on the shelf, and I went and I was looking in I guess they keep it in what is deemed the occult section. And so I was looking, and it's not real big, but that's where the cryptids and the ghosts and all the stuff is, and the paranormal stuff. So I found a copy of it. That's a good one too. And then, of course, I believe
that's available.
Yeah, that one's still available. And then you wrote Weird Wisconsin, right?
And Weird Michigan. Well, I think.
Yeah. I co-authored Weird Wisconsin with Richard Hendricks. And then they asked me to write Weird Michigan. So, and then I did two books that are also out of from that same other company, out of print, which were follow-ups to those, because Barnes & Noble decided not to do other issues of things that were missed in the first 2 books. So I did Strange Wisconsin and Strange Michigan as well. So there's a lot, and each one has as much as the original other book. So that was kind of fun too. That was actually a lot of fun.
Those are fun books. I have the Weird Michigan, Weird Wisconsin. A buddy of mine's from Michigan. My brother lived there for years, And three of my good friends are from Wisconsin. So I actually sent them copies of those books for Christmas, I think like 3-4 years ago.
Oh, bless your heart.
Yeah, I've bought lots of your books over the year. And we just made a deal recently, and I'm going to be giving away, just to reiterate that to the fans, I'm going to be giving away, and on this episode too, one of your autographed books.
That's great. It may have, some of those autograph books have original drawings that I spent the other night making sure each one of these had either an original verse, or I call it my werewolf doodle, where it's just kind of a quickly drawn werewolf cartoon.
Yeah.
That I put in book signings if I have time. So they all either have a verse or the werewolf cartoon in them.
And weren't you a cartoonist or something like that?
Yeah, that's why I ended up at the newspaper. I actually was just trying to get a place. I just offered them my services free. I said, I'll make free cartoons for you. I just need to have them in print, so I have samples. And then they decided to start paying me $8 a week. I mean, this was not the Great Depression. It was like somebody now would say, well, I'll pay you 50 cents, a cartoon. It was about like that comparison. And I still like the cartooning. It just didn't click in time, but I was actually doing a lot of cartooning for them that whole 10 years of different things.
And also you have a DVD out, and we're going to be giving away those too. I'm going to give one of those away for the show. You want to tell us about that?
That DVD is, I don't know if I'll ever be able to make another one, but my son, who has the art degree, was really majoring in film. He's a really good filmmaker. And it just so happened that a dear uncle of mine, my only uncle on either side, passed away the year before last and left me and my brothers and sisters each just a small, I mean, we were going to maybe fix our deck with it, but we thought, well, we could make a movie. I actually thought that myself, because this had been coming to me from somebody who lives in Hillsboro, Wisconsin, which is like in the mid-central west area of the state, in this really odd place where the glacier never came. It's called the driftless area, because the glacier never drifted that way. And you'd go in there, and there are deep ravines and rivers and hills and mountains. You'd swear you were in Colorado. And it's within this 18-20 square mile or mile radius around this little town. And over that little area in the past, I'd say a couple of decades at the most, this former newspaper reporter, catch a theme here, had people coming to him and telling him they had seen a mountain lion. And the weirdest thing was that well over half of the reports were of black mountain lions, which are not supposed to exist. They're black leopards and black jaguars that are called sometimes black panthers. But the people were swearing what they saw looked like a mountain lion. And I was approaching I do a lot of TV talking head shows, and I, kind of get to talking to a lot of the producers, and I was trying to find one that was interested in doing a story on this, because I thought that was fascinating. There's no explanation for these black cats, and people were seeing that sometimes they would see like a black one and a tan one together with cubs mixed of different colors. And the DNR, Department of Natural Resources, was completely denying that could be true, that they were seeing anything. And that's why the book is called I Know What I Saw, because it's about things like this, where people are just denied their dignity when they go and report something like this. And the chapters 10 and 11 of the book I Know What I Saw dealt with this particular thing in Hillsboro, with all of these sightings coming in. And when I got the small inheritance from my uncle, it gradually occurred to me that I could make a movie, a very, very strictly enforced shoestring of a movie, but that I could do it because I had my son, and he happened to have some time available right then and could do all the filming. He actually did the filming, the editing, the animation, you name it. He did anything technical like that, he did. And I had the original inspiration for the film and how it should look, and did artwork for it, drawings. So, and my husband was the producer and just kind of general marketer sort of person. So we're still in the mid-marketing stage right now, but to my mind, it really came out looking just like I thought. And it does have, it's got a very long section from a Native American that I interviewed that tells the connection to Native Americans of that area and the big cats, and especially they saw black ones too. Black ones were routinely reported by settlers to that area. But it's really scary because a lot of these incidents with people, it's right up on their lawns. And very often it's we had a black one reported, a large black one, just a year ago. And it was just walking through this guy's backyard right in town, which is very scary and creepy. I mean, they could, and again, the agencies are just denying that it's possible or that they are there. So there's a lot to it, and it's very different. Nobody should confuse it with the Tiger King at all.
Yeah, no.
You know, it's not that we don't have intrigue and interesting stuff, and sometimes it's dark, but it's not, loony in those sorts of ways. That I think that movie's been fascinating people, but it has nothing to do with the Tiger King. So completely different, but just as much fun.
Well, we hope it's awesome because I haven't got a chance to see it yet, but it sounds great. It sounds great. I know that the whole black cat thing. My grandfather, he used to stay out in Marfa, Texas, out in the West Texas, in Big Bend. Yeah, it's real nice.
Marfa Lights.
Yeah, the Marfa Lights, a Big Bend area, and he swore up and down that there were all kinds of weird stuff in Pinto Canyon and the Chenati Mountains. He kept saying that he would see black cats that looked like mountain lions. Now there were jaguars up there, but he swore up and down that they were mountain lions. They were not jaguars, and that he had seen both, and he knew the difference. And he actually had a friend named I think his name was I want to say his name was Jaime, but I'm not for sure if that's correct. But he had a buddy that was about his age. They both served in the war in World War II, and he knew the guy, and he lived out there on the border. And it was a real nice guy, and he had some wild animals that he had caught out in that area. And he had a jaguar, and it was black, but you could see the spotting on it. It was real, the melanistic, whatever. You could see through it, and you could see that you could tell what it was. My grandfather was like, no, it was a mountain lion. Like, he swore up and down that he'd see him. And he claimed to have seen, when he was in Louisiana as a truck driver, driving through there, he claimed to have seen something that looked like a hyena-looking, what I would say as a hyena-looking dogman. Him and my grandmother.
I've had that reported. Yeah, when they stand up.
They stand up. Yeah.
Yeah, that ruff on the neck is really distinctive, very much. Well, there are black leopards, that really had a wide distribution too. The jaguars are the biggest, and the leopards. Now, when you see my film, which is called Return to Wildcat Mountain, and it really is the Wildcat Mountain that they have right there at Hillsborough too, from settler days, but when you see that, there are some photographs that we took, that we actually filmed, of a black leopard, and it's growling and stuff. And on that one, you can kind of see the spotting on it, and it's a little different. It's a little bigger than the mountain lions too. But the thing is that they're said to not be able to breed with the tan mountain lions, supposedly. But we've also got. Oh, I shouldn't have said there's no connection with the Tiger King, because we do have. Jeff Kozlowski, who has a similarly named animal shelter in Wisconsin, very close to Hillsborough, by the way, and he is in our film, and he talks at great length about how they could be related and interbred, and he shows they actually have at his place, it's in Rock Springs, just west of Baraboo, they have a liger, which is a lion-tiger mix, and then it's bred again to another lion. So it's lion liger, I guess. Yeah, exactly, liger.
Yeah,
which is weird. But he had a lot of really fascinating things to say too. We found we could not find a single official, like DNR official or sheriff's deputy or even lion organization person that would talk on our film. But he was very generous about it, and the person who also was actually formerly a Hillsborough, he was a Hillsborough newspaper editor at the time, Native American, who had information on how the old legends about these black cats in that area went. And they were very important in local lore. They were called water spirits, or they had different cat names for them too, but they were said to come out of freshwater springs in the lakes, and their job was to fight the thunderbirds, overhead so that there would be peace between the heavens and the earth, and there would be, instead of thunderstorms, you'd have good spring rains, that sort of thing. And there were animal-shaped effigy mounds in the shapes of the mountain lion. And so you can tell it's very deeply entrenched. It's always been around in that area. And that's what all the people who live there all agree with that, because their ancestors report seeing it too. It was even in Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House in the Big Woods. They talk about her grandfather getting chased while on his horse by what they called a Black Panther. So there it is. So why is it such a mystery? Nobody can get a good picture of it when it's out in the wild, however. Black big cats in zoos picture beautifully. You can photograph just about anything you want, but not these things in the wild. That's the weird thing. And our Native American guest, Paul Ahrens, said that this was because he was told by his grandfather that these cats are actually part spirit, and that when they're on Earth in the buff color or the black color, if they're on Earth, they're solid, but they can go back to the spirit world, which is what I was also told by Ho-Chunk Nation people and some other friends that I have, is the same. They say that's the same way for these other mystery animals. The upright wolves and the Bigfoot are all structured this way.
And what do you think about that? Because that was actually one of the questions I was going to ask you about your opinion on that.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's the closest. It's the closest to meeting the descriptions that people give of these things, because it's not always just seeing it doing something. It's often either, many times, I know somebody who's writing about them disappearing. That happens quite a bit more than you would think. They do things like jump on the top of people's car, or just some people think they're getting telepathic messages from them, and it's saying rather specific things mentally, like not in English, but they know what it's saying, which is, I could jump on your car. I could, if you tell anyone you saw me, I'll get you. Kind of threatening sort of messages, like keep away sort of messages. So they just come closest to explaining all the just strange things about them when you follow the story, of the Native Americans.
Yeah, that's another thing I was going to ask you. You touched on the Thunderbirds. Would that be the Piasa in that region? Was that what it was called?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Some people call it the Piasa bird. It's not quite a bird. It's got some other features of other animals. That actually is in northern Illinois, painted on some rocks. They have the same type of thing on rock paintings up in Michigan. But that's sort of a different creature. It's not quite the same thing. If you look at it, it's if I'm thinking right, it's got scales, and there's another. The one in Wisconsin is different too. It is actually probably more closely related to a water panther.
So is it Piasa or Piasa?
Well, I usually hear it as Piasa, but with these names, you never know. So it's hard to know which syllable to accent, and sometimes, even different tribal people will say it different ways. Just like somebody in another state might pronounce a word, they might pronounce a word differently in Kentucky than I would say it up here in Wisconsin.
Like caramel and caramel.
Caramel and caramel. Well, now that I have said it on the air and I have said Piasa, I will now start a campaign subversively to make everyone use that word and say it that way.
Well,
to keep myself from looking stupid.
The correct way, which is...
So you're going to counter my campaign. Okay, all right. I see how it is.
That seems only fair.
All right, I have to kick you off the show after this interview. That's fine. Hey. See what you did, Linda? Started a war.
There you go.
I'm gonna start throwing it in conversation too. Yeah, I was gonna order a piazza. I don't know, but I think it sounds better to call it a piazza.
Yeah. I don't like it.
Yeah, with pepperoni.
Well, it does. If you talk about the accents, if you think of like Kiowa or other Native American words, they do often accent the first syllable. So it could be.
Yeah, the Kiowa were the only allies of the Comanche. My grandmother was Comanche, and that's like, I have, I'm I don't go around claiming it. I mean, there's some people, they got like, I'm 1,000th, native, I'm, whatever, and they go and make a big, they go and they make a big campaign out of it. I'm like, look, I'm literally like a quarter. I don't go around, like wearing a headdress and throwing tomahawks, and But yeah, that's the interesting thing about all the native traditions, because I know you mentioned the Kiowa. The Comanches didn't really have a religion, but they were close allies with the Kiowa, and I was reading a book about them. And the Kiowa had 3 in particular totems, and one of them was a black cat, and the other one was a crow, like a black crow. And I can't remember the third one, but that's weird. That's interesting that there was a bird and a cat, and that they actually, I guess had sort of a pseudo religion. They were the only ones violent enough to keep up with the Comanches and get their respect.
Well, these, I don't know if you read about it in one of my books, but there are certainly major books written on it, but the animal effigy mounds of southeastern Wisconsin are unique really to anywhere. They do spill over into Minnesota and Illinois and a little bit of Indiana at the edges, but there are 96% of all the animal-shaped ancient effigies, that's like a raised, kind of a raised form, in the world are in southern Wisconsin. And
is that Cahokia? Is that
no? They may be related slightly to the Cahokians.
That's in Illinois, right?
The Cahokians are actually farther south on the Mississippi, by Illinois.
Illinois, yeah,
kind of down in that area. But they had like pyramids, like blunt top pyramids, and there's a place that sort of corresponds to that too in Wisconsin, a little farther east of what we were talking about. There's a state park now, but there were step pyramids with blunted tops, and they were from a different era. But these effigy mounds are probably a little older than those, and they were effectively terraforming the native peoples there in southern Wisconsin, terraformed the land to cover it. I mean, when the settlers came, they thought they were in some big park somewhere, because they burned off the bramble, with controlled fires around the big trees, and then wherever there was water, they set up these pseudo battle lines, and we don't even know what they were meaning for most of these things to be doing, but just about every type of animal that was a totem animal, especially. There were bear, there were deer, there were wolves, there were big cats. They called it a water panther, was another name they had for it. The lynx mounds. And some of these were, like 100, 150 feet long. There's one, especially of the thunderbird, tons of birds. But there's one 150 feet long still on the UW campus area in Madison. And if you can imagine coming and finding this land where all these mythical figures, hugely rendered in raised beds of soil, everywhere where there was any kind of major water, and then these beautiful huge pine trees and things where the ground was just burned out and kept so people could walk around it. It was a completely different looking place at that time. It just kind of bends your mind to try and envision it.
Well, it's funny, we're talking about this, about the mounds. There is archaeologists, that actually believe that the Aztecs actually came out of Wisconsin. That sounds really weird, but they were farmers, and they have like they can kind of trace 6 centuries, of them going traveling from the farmland, and where it was disturbed and how it was disturbed and how it was farmed, and the similarities between them and the Aztecs, and how it went all the way down. It just kept going from Wisconsin further down the first time that corn appeared, and they can kind of trace it. And I've always wondered that if they had laid down roots in Wisconsin, maybe the winters were a little bit harsh, so they just kept going south until they ended up where, of course, their myth was that they were supposed to stop, which is on the Mexican flag, an eagle eating a snake. And legend has it that it just so happened that they found the city of Tenochtitlan that was built by a previous civilization, that they found the cactus that was, of course, if I found that city, I'd be like, well, here it is. And that's where because it's already built and ready to move into. Excuse me, senor, what about the snake that's supposed to, oh yeah, I saw it over there in the corner. An eagle was eating a snake. This is where it's supposed to be. So the leaders probably just said that they found it, but that supposedly they just kept going until they found where they were supposed to be. And I know that there is a connection, because I believe because of the god Zolotl. It's actually starts with an X, and he was a dog-headed god depicted, I think, as like he had like a skeleton body or something.
Yeah.
And he had a dog's head or like a wolf's head. He's depicted in and he was on many of their like their little armor, the little shields that they would use on their wooden shields or whatever, that the Spaniards noticed that they had this, like in Huitzilopochtli was their little devil god that was bloodthirsty, and so yeah, there are archaeologists that believe that could be where they all started. They all kind of the Mesoamericans, they kind of were gathered in that spot and branched out into different areas. The Cherokee moving further and going down into the south east, spending time and creating Cahokia. But the Wisconsin mounds predate all that, supposedly.
Yeah, well, the one that I mentioned before, it's by Lake Mills, that has the step pyramids in Wisconsin. It's called Aztalan because the first archaeologist that saw it immediately related it to Cahokia, and but especially they related it to the Aztecs. They thought that it was related to people who traded their way up the Mississippi River and stopped off at different places and made their own outposts. There's another one up in the western side of far western side of Wisconsin too, that is mostly grown over, but you can still kind of see it if you know it's there. But yeah, there's a lot of really fascinating things, and then you get into the copper trade, which helped the Native Americans in Northern America to kind of get into something they could trade with. There's a big kind of a hot controversy going on about whether Phoenicians came and did all the trading. They do know that a huge amount of the copper that was in the ground up in the northern Wisconsin, UP, Michigan area, it was very unusual geologically. I won't get into that, but that made it easy to trace, and most of it ended up on the other side of the world in parts of Europe, which is puzzling too. But they can see where, it mined out of the earth up in northern Wisconsin and the UP. So it's just, yeah, you could go on and on with these things. It's fascinating to follow the threads and try and figure out how it went. And I think archaeologists have a lot more interest than they used to, and they're discovering more and more in those areas.
And it's interesting too how we were talking about jaguars earlier, because I know that the Mayans, who were the Aztecs' neighbors and mortal enemies, who also were defeated and eventually succumbed to the Spaniards, the Mayans had a god that was the contemporary of Zolotl, which would have been Zipitotec or Ziptotec, depending on how you pronounce it or say it. I think it's Xipe. And Zipitotec was basically the god of the underworld. He was a jaguar-headed god, whereas the deity for the Aztecs was a wolf-headed. And that's funny because the jaguar was revered by both the Mayans and the Aztecs, and they celebrated it. Yeah, it was the eagle and the jaguar. Just like we were talking about the Kiowa, they had this crow and this black cat, which is weird. Those two animals come up over and over again, and the coyote is always kind of the goat. He always plays the mischievous, deviant, and the wolf is usually revered as another one. I think there's something to that, how they all are related. I think they're all related, and there's a very similar thread that goes with that. That being said, do you feel like this thing that was being seen in Wisconsin, do you think that it could be something like that, like an underworld guardian, or maybe it was it was like some sort of ethereal being that could move in and out of portals, maybe there because of the presence of these natives?
Well, there is some sort of evidence that, I can't deny it one way or the other, but it's there and it seems connected. It's on Bray Road. I discovered something a few years ago, and I haven't really made a big push with it because I had to struggle with myself whether I wanted it to be known or not. But my real puzzle with Bray Road was all of these years was why what was out there? Why would there have been so many sightings of what looked like an upright wolf that sometimes acted in ways that the natural wolf wouldn't or couldn't? And I just had a very hard time finding anything that supported this theory, because Bray Road, it's not like some spooky lane. It's a mostly straight 3 to 4 mile road that happens to be a shortcut between two highways, and a shortcut to the county hospital as well. So it's not untraveled. It has mostly family farms, lots of cornfields, a few woodsy areas. But let's see, what was the point of my talk here? Well, I was just, I know, I was going to say my reason. This is sort of mind-blowing, and people have not picked up on it too much, I suppose because it's hard to prove. But the area around Bray Road, I'll just start by saying, is riddled with small, fresh spring-fed lakes. Get that tongue twister? And I was looking at them one day, and I had actually found an older book in the Elkhorn Library that I hadn't really seen before. And that told me that the Native Americans used all of the roads that were right there at the end of Bray Road were used as paths by Native Americans, and that they would tap the trees for maple sugar, and it was considered sacred to them, because sugar is something that helps you preserve food, and it makes things taste good, and has all kinds of uses, and maple syrup is also nutritional. And so there were huge maple tree groves all around where Bray Road is now in those days, and that was helpful. So I was staring at one of the maps, and it occurred to me that this end of Bray Road looked like the center of a wheel, and there was a line from that wheel in each of the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, which is what Native Americans used to build their, what they call medicine wheels, which are artificial constructs set in certain places. They aren't always geological like this one. Usually they're made, by stones, or, just laid out with wood pieces or whatever. But this was an actual geological fact that the end of Bray Road was the center of quite a large medicine wheel, maybe with two different circles of wheels, one within the other, and each one of these led on what is now a town or county road, but was then unpaved, but there was a trail. Each one of these led to a special lake system, and these were all of these lake systems, I knew through my research, had been used as summer homes by different Native American tribes. At least 5 of them. There were Potawatomi and Fox and Sauk, and a couple of other besides that. And it was such a shock, because I realized that's it. Bray Road is the center of an ancient geological medicine wheel made by water and fresh springs.
That's crazy.
And it's right there. And I drew it up, kind of a crude depiction of it, and I realized it worked. And it actually, you can separate it into eight different spokes coming out from the center wheel. And I had like a lucid dream about it. Ooh. Which a lucid dream is when you're in the dream and you wake up and it's not a dream and you're doing something else somewhere else. Where I was out on Bray Road, and there were just all these people, ancient people, just wearing simple clothing that were sort of floating around there. And I wanted to see, I was asking them if I could talk to their chief, and I had to lie down on the ground until he was ready. And if I got up, I would have just died in my sleep, basically, is what they said. And eventually this one floated over to me, just a very old-looking man, and confirmed to me that, yes, this was it. Didn't say much else, but just confirmed what I had found. And so it was kind of a very profound experience for me. And I didn't know if I should publish it or not. I did. I think it's in Hunting the Monsters Among Us, the one just before this present book that I just had come out. So that was kind of mind-blowing to me. And I don't know if your listeners, some people believe that lucid dreams are possible. Others, I have had them occasionally most of my life. I haven't really sought them, but they just happen sometimes. And, usually they're confirmed with something. So that was all interesting to me, but it is there, and it did finally give me a reason that that road should have had such special things. And the crux of it was that these animals were really guardian, sort of ghost dogs, if or guardian dogs that are from the other world, whatever you want to call it. And that's why they were being seen around Bray Road.
What would their purpose be, Linda?
Well, I guess my feeling of it was that they were created to be guardians of, I don't know what it would be anymore, but they were sort of provoked or disturbed, or not necessarily performing that guardian service anymore, but they're there. And it gets real esoteric, and some of it you can believe, and and I don't ever expect anybody to believe somebody to believe that anything that I describe is true just because it comes from me. It's some things we have inner information on, and it's just private and doesn't matter to other people. Once in a while, something like this happens, and the other one had been when I noticed that there was a huge correlation between certain effigy mounds in I think I'm being blocked from saying certain effigy mounds that are all over the southeastern Wisconsin that are in the shape of the wolves, or the canine sized. Excuse me, I'm reminding myself of a certain politician right now. I sometimes I try and tell this, and I feel like something's messing me up, that I shouldn't be saying too much about it. But I did anyway. There was a correlation between the effigy mounds shaped like the wolf effigies, and I was able to talk to a woman who was a Ho-Chunk elder, and she told me that yes, and she drew a little picture of what the water spirit based on these things actually looked like, but I could never reproduce it, and so I haven't. I haven't told anybody about that. But this was also something that correlated to another phenomenon that was in a newly printed book, and I used to use them for transparencies before everybody was really using the more modern slideshows. And I could lay one over the other, and they perfectly matched. Oh, I know. The most, okay. What they matched to was concentrations of sightings of the Dogman or upright canine. And yeah, that was what you could lay one transparency over the other. And I used to do that at talks, and people would just gasp because it was almost perfect. And one of those maps came from this team from the University of Wisconsin that had been studying this, and came up with they're the ones that came up with the concentrations of the old guardian dog figures set into effigy mounds. And then I was the one that found the concentrations of sightings. And this was not just on Bray Road, though. This was all over southeastern Wisconsin.
So, oh man, that's a lot to take in. So as far as the lucid dreaming goes, and man, I am good with all that, because I have had those my whole life. I've had very vivid dreams, very lucid dreams. I've had dreams that one of my shows I talk, it's actually probably one of my favorite episodes, but it actually got the least views. So go figure. But it was an interview I did with a lady named Laura Ketchledge, who is also an author. And we talk in the second part of that interview, I think it's episode 39, where we talk about this place called the City of Night. And like, I've gone there and I've seen people that I know in my real life there. They remember it. Like, they've been there. You know what I mean?
Oh, wow.
And it is such a weird phenomena. When I first started talking with my wife, when we first started speaking and corresponding, she told me about her experiences in this place that was like an upside down negative world. And it was like, I was immediately like, oh, the City of Darkness, City of Night, whatever. I didn't really have a name for it. 2 or 3 of my friends.
That sounds like a great novel.
It probably would be. If you listen to that episode, I talk about it in depth, and I bring on a friend of mine who had an experience with me in that city, and where I ran into what I felt was a friend of mine that was there, and but was deceased for years. I had an incident not too long ago in that same vein with my nephew Anthony, where something bad was about to happen to him, and something was warning me, and I kept going to that place. Didn't see any cryptids there, thank goodness. But other people
Probably
have
just as
claimed,
well.
other people have claimed that they've seen things there that would fit that description. One is like this bird type entity that's like a part bird, part man looking thing that I've been given descriptions of. And so as far as that goes, the lucid dreaming and all that, yeah, I had a sighting of a Dogman in my hometown.
Wow.
This is going to be interesting too. Maybe, I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure it will.
But I used to work with a guy who was from Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Me and Anthony worked with this guy, and he actually ran a patrol for us. And when I talked to him about the Beast of Bray Road and about the whole stories and all that, like I asked him what he thought about it, he gave me a blank look and just says like, I don't know what you're talking about. But he looked like he was lying. And I always told Anthony, I was like, I don't think this guy's being honest, because he just kind of looked at me and his face kind of turned white, and he just like didn't say anything about it. But that's weird, because like there are people that live in my hometown, and my hometown is full of these legends of these werewolves, and there's all kinds of myths and legends surrounding where they came from, what they are, and why they're there. But nobody has any solid, whatever. And there are people, I'm pretty sure, that are from my hometown that really don't know anything about it. They just ignore it like it's not there, So
yeah, I've seen that too. I've seen that happen too. And it's okay with me, because people have a right to choose what they want to think about and what they don't. And for me, there are places where I just don't go. I mean, I have the feeling that there could be a darker side to it that I don't know. And you know what? I don't want to know if there's something like that. I just kind of let that be.
Yeah, and I think I'm not 100% on this, but I think you're kind of like me. I tend to go back and forth between what these things are. I've had lots of conversations with Vic Cundiff. I've been on his show about 13 times. I just recently did the 300th episode for him. And
oh, wow.
And we've gone back and forth many times and discussed different cases and things. And he's like, hey, what do you think of this? And I give him information, and I'm like, what do you think of that? And it's hard to put our and sometimes we'll come to a conclusion that's like, well, these things are some sort of spirit. And then it's like, well, no, maybe they're flesh and blood. And we just kind of go back and forth, vacillate between the two. And I really don't know what they are or what to make of them. I'm still, stumped. And like I had my experience October of 1990. It'll be 30 years in October.
During Halloween.
It was on Halloween, yeah. And Tony, I mean, he's heard the story since he was a kid. This is my godson, so he's heard it since he was a child.
Well, I'm not only just the stories I've heard of Linda since I was a kid. I mean, it's always been something that you've been...
Yeah,
I've always brought it up to me.
Been interested in your books and your work, because when I looked for information on these things, there wasn't a whole lot. And so I found Linda Godfrey's books, and I was like, someone who's writing about this, and I had an old girlfriend back in college who had told me, she's like, you get on the internet. I wasn't real tech savvy. She's like, get on this newfangled internet. I'm just kidding. And I got on there, and so I looked up Wolfman, werewolves, all these different types, and never thought to look up Dogman. But when my brother came back from Michigan, he told me, he's like, dude, that's a Dogman. Like he just instantly, it was like, so I looked up Dogman. That's how I found Vic. Was like just continually searching through those terms. And then one day I found Vic Cundiff, whatever year it was his show came out. I found him, and then we started corresponding, and then I told my story, and then I said, look, I've been researching this for 20, at that point, 25 years. Now it's been 30. I said, I've been researching this for 25 years, and I've gotten tons of reports from I didn't know what to do with them. I wasn't going to write a book because I can't really write, but I would write them down in the notebooks, at least the cliff notes of what people would give me. And I kept track of all these stories I had. Now, I collected stories from that, but not only that, but like anything paranormal or out of the realm of normality, because to me, anything that's not normal is paranormal. And so I just call it that.
That just means para means above or beyond.
Yeah, normal. Exactly. That's why. And so paranormal has become synonymous with just ghost hunting, but that's not really my bag. It's like anything that's out of the norm of reality, because when I saw what I saw when I was 15, everything that I thought was just nonsense all just is like, this is real. If the hombre lobo is real, the cadejo is real, then something else is real. Any of these other things could be real. Because my tia Hova, my great aunt, would always be like, mijo, the cadejo is out there, the cadejo. And I was always like, yeah. The la chusa, el llorona, el cocoy, they're hiding in the closet, the fantasmo. And I'd always made fun of it. I thought it was mentiras, like a bunch of bull, crap, a bunch of lies. And I was like, this is just stories to tell kids so that you'll behave and you won't get out of line.
Right.
And then I saw it when I was 15, and it was an up close encounter, and so the guy I was with, he became a preacher, and so it kind of changed our lives.
What did it look like? You have to tell me what you saw.
Well, what I saw, it looked like it was blackish, a smoky gray color, and I thought it was at first, from one block away, we thought it was a German Shepherd, that it was a friend of ours that lived on the corner that had a dog. And I said, that's not their dog. And long story short, it stood up, and it just kind of turned and looked at us to the left, and then whoop, whoop, across the road on two legs. And I was like,
wow.
At that moment, I think my whole world just changed. I mean, it was like, and then I tried to make my way back to the house, to my friend's house, and the thing came in between the two houses and like cornered me. I don't want to say cornered me because it was behind a fence, but I was afraid to go past that fence until my friend's dad came out. He's got to be the bravest man in the world. It was standing right there, and he came to the edge of the yard, and the thing it started looking at him, and then I just ran past it and went inside. And then,
did you get a feel for how tall it was?
It was 7.5 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I know that because it went by the window, and it just looked in the window, and we measured from my friend and his brother, we measured, how high it was. It was standing up. And now I've never seen it again. Now, I thought I saw something that was sort of similar to that at, believe it or not, a job site that we were working on the edge of town where we had heard a lot of weird stuff. There was a guy. And Tony, you worked that job site now that there was a farmer where they were building tract houses, because they're building houses literally right up to these people's farms. And so,
see, that's what you get for when you start taking away the land.
And it's good farmland. They're taking black land, beautiful black land. It's like beautiful soil. Anything will grow there, and they're using it to build houses. And now it's not made for that, and these houses, the foundations are cracking almost instantly, and I'm like, yeah, because it's not. I was raised in the black land. You don't build on that. And so anyway, these people are whatever. But so we're working for these builders, and they had built right up to this farm, and there was a farmer over there that was having all kinds of problems. His cattle were being snatched up, like killed, and chewed up, and he was like, have you seen any coyotes out here? And he thought that there was like possibly somebody had snatched up one of his goats. And so one night I was out there with my wife, and we saw something weird. She thinks it was a Sasquatch. I don't know what it was. I don't say I saw something unless I know, like I definitively saw it. So I don't go around saying I saw a Bigfoot.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I do now, but I didn't for 20 years.
Yeah, and that was the other thing. You claim to have seen a Bigfoot. I mean, like that's got to be. I've never seen I saw the back of what may have been a Bigfoot. I couldn't tell you. I mean,
see, and I saw the back of what may have been a Dogman, but I could never say that I saw a Dogman, because I know this was 7 feet tall, because it crossed a road and went past a reflective road sign that we measured, and it was 7 feet tall, and it had gray. Its back was just caught in a spotlight. I was there with a History Channel crew and several witnesses.
Holy smokes.
Pardon?
I said, holy smokes. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So, and it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. It was like a 90% humidity and 95 degrees. I don't know how anybody could have been out there in a fursuit. They would have just expired, from the heat and everything. But we were there watching, because they were college students from a nearby medical school, and in Michigan it was. And we'd been there most of the day, came back, had been there most of the evening, and we were seeing eyes shine in the bushes. And at one point I heard very close to me the sound of what, if you've got a dog and it's wet and it shakes its fur out, You can't mistake what that is. Only it had to have been something really big. And then the photographer turned his camera around the other direction. And when he did that, something ran across this gravel road. It was we were way out in the middle of nowhere, literally. And I saw just its spine hit the edge. I could see that it was soft looking gray fur. And that was all I saw of it. And it just went and kept on going. And one of the witnesses saw it and just turned deathly white and said, "We're leaving. We're not staying here." So yeah, so I've had the opposite view. I've seen now. If I were going to pretend that I had seen something that I didn't, I would have at least made it the Dogman. I never expected to start seeing the Bigfoot, although I've always been just as interested in them. And from the very beginning, back in 1991, I had people telling me that there were lots of Bigfoot in the area, even though I hadn't even mentioned the term Bigfoot in my story. But I started out knowing that there were probably as many Bigfoot reports, and I had tons of those come in too. And I've published those in some.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
yeah. There was one that in a book. That I think it was the Bray Road book, Linda, or maybe it was one after that. And these people saw one run across the road and then jump over the guardrail and down into it. Yeah, it was off of a bridge. Now, when they showed it on the I think it was Monster Quest or Monsters and Mysteries. Right. It was one of those shows. You've been on so many. And that
one was Monster Quest. Monster Quest. Pagliaronis. Their name was Pagliaroni.
Pagliaroni, yeah, and they depicted it as a Wolfman, but they didn't actually see a Wolfman. They saw a Bigfoot.
They saw a Bigfoot.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. The show did not. The show had sort of a blended quasi Bigfoot / Wolfman that they could use for either one, and I suppose it was cheaper on the animation that way. I can't figure out any other reason, but no, they drew their own picture of it, and it was nothing but a Bigfoot. In fact, they were kind of disappointed that it didn't plainly show that it was a Bigfoot. But yeah, it was on Honey Creek in southeastern Wisconsin. They were coming home about 10 o'clock after being out for dinner. And nice people. I still keep in touch with them, and they're very nice salt of the earth type people. And they were just crossing the Honey Creek Bridge, which is just a very small bridge. It's 2 cars can pass, but just sort of barely. And so you have to slow down for this bridge. So they were luckily slowed down. And they said this thing came running out of the darkness and went right in front of their car. And it stopped and made eye contact with them. And that frightened them a lot. They didn't even say anything until they got home. They just kept driving and going. But the weird thing was, it put as it ran across the bridge in front of their headlights, it put one hand on the railing and then put its feet together and sort of vaulted over the railing, like a gymnast would do. And I went there and measured. It was a good 20-foot drop down to this little creek. There were I don't think a human could have done that.
No.
And had ankles that worked yet, after they tried that. And yeah, that was remarkable. They were just, honest people. They had a lovely home. She ran her own business. She had a house and business cleaning company, and he worked for a car manufacturer in Racine, and just no reason to make something like that up. So, I've always totally believed them.
Yeah, they seemed like believable people. But so yeah, I was going to ask you a question, and since we're talking about Bigfoot, what are your thoughts about the big guy? What do you think about Bigfoot? What is it, and do you think it's like for example, Ken, a mutual friend of ours, he thinks that it's just a flesh and blood creature and that there's a fossil record for it. And I agree with that to an extent, but I think that there's more going on than just that, because too many people report like all these sort of weird paranormal things that happen, around when this Bigfoot appears. Not so much as the Dogman, but it does seem to happen, And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the thing is, it has abilities that may not be supernatural, that, that they appear paranormal to us because they are different creatures than us, but they are just differently rearranged in terms of their body structure. And some of their innate abilities. For instance, so now just to start out, I do think they're closely related to people, whichever that is. Whether my Native American friends tell the absolute truth about it, going to the spirit world when it wants to and coming here, but it has things that are just being discovered. For instance, in my book Monsters Among Us, I had M.K. Davis look at some hairs that were found, and what he's discovered, and I think other people have too, is there are types of animals that have partly transparent body hairs that are mixed in with the other ones, and that if something is in just the right light or position, it can sort of mask out the exact outline, so it looks like a big ball of fuzz sitting there rather than a sharply outlined creature. That would be one example. The idea that it may have infrasound and ultrasound, because you can get a really wide variety of bad symptoms from ultrasound. They can include nausea, ringing in your ears, disorientation, a whole bunch of things, and worse. And this is something that tigers use infrasound is it infrasound or ultrasound?
Yeah, infrasound. Yeah, tigers and lions.
Yeah, tigers and lions can do that. Whales, which are another type of mammal, use it. So we're not talking about anything magical or fairy-like or otherworldly. We're talking about science of this world that applies to them, and why couldn't it? Another thing is people believe it may have a type of telepathic ability. Well, telepathic ability is not necessarily supernatural either. There's a great book called, it's a science book, but it doesn't sound like it. Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home I think it's for dinner. I don't have it right in front of me. But it's about the apparent telepathic connections between dogs and humans especially when they have a close emotional relationship. And if you think about it, if if Bigfoot is spread around the country and the continent, probably more likely, and it's large, it's going to need a wide area to range and get enough food for itself, something that people estimate it weighing up to, 800 pounds or more.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is a pretty big creature. They're going to need a wide hunting range, and yet they're going to want to contact each other. One way might be banging logs on another tree. That's the most commonly known one. Developing peculiar whistles or shrieks that are sounds. But it would be even more efficient if they had developed that same innate sense for telepathy of some sort to just sort of motion one of them that's gotten too far away, where to come to meet up, for instance. These are all things that scientists are studying in controlled situations, and then, we're sort of applying them to the Bigfoot in a very speculative way. It's not like we've got a Bigfoot and we can test his hair, that make sure for sure it's Bigfoot hair, and then see if it's partly transparent. We can't, open a Bigfoot's brain and see if it can send telepathy. We just have to speculate on it. So, but I think, why not? Why, if these other mammals have these attributes, why could the Bigfoot not have them?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I would believe it because, me and my dog Banjo, sometimes I feel like he'll think something. I'm not saying that we have a telepathically connected, or anything like that, but I remember sometimes that, like, he'll do something and I'm like, oh, I was thinking, like, oh, I should, tell him to do this. Or, like, sometimes I'll be getting ready to go to the bathroom and he's already, like, at the door waiting for me. Like, he's expecting me to go out because I take him with me to work sometimes.
You and Banjo have a connection. See, what happened, Linda, with this dog is that he found it on the side of the road and he gave a guy an avocado for it. I'm just kidding. That is not what happened. No, seriously, this is the truth here. We had a job site and Tony was working at it. And this was 2016.
Yeah, 4 years ago.
Yeah, about 4 years ago. And Tony, he calls me up and he's like, hey, Uncle Wolf. That's what they call me, Uncle Wolf. He's like, Uncle Wolf, there's this dog here that's been abandoned. And I'm like, nope, absolutely not. Nope, we are not taking another. Nope, we have too many dogs. I had to take my mom's Chihuahua, and I said, no, this is not Noah's Ark, and I hung up, and so then he sends my brother, who's got the soft spot, big tough guy, my brother, but he sends him the picture. My brother's like, oh man, check out this dog, man, and he shows me a picture, and I'm like, what is this? The dog that he wants to bring home? And he's like, yeah, dude. And now the poor little guy, pobrecito, he had like ants, that had bit him, and it was all over his face. Like there were little sores, like he had been, and he was the cutest little long-haired Chihuahua you'd ever seen. And I just was like, oh, God. And my brother shows me the picture, and then he recruits my nephew, Anthony, over here. And then they start working on me, and they're like, poor thing, he's just there, and there's no, it's going to get killed. He's living under some pallets by a garbage can, which, is that true, Tony, or is that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he was.
Okay, I was making sure that wasn't a story y'all just used to butter me up. So I go over there the next day. I said, well, if it's still there tomorrow, we'll I feel guilty leaving it there for one more night, but poor little guy was living under some pallets, I guess, behind the thrift store in a parking lot we were doing security at. And so I go over there and I see him, and he's scared he was just shaking. But Tony had been feeding him and petting him. And this dog is very smart. And I think that they remember. And I think that he knows that Tony saved him. Like he would still be living in the street or dead if it wasn't for Tony. And he has a connection with this dog. He takes it to work with him. My wife even bought him a little security shirt that the dog wears. And he's Tony's little perennial sidekick. He's always, and when we go by the job site or something to drop off Tony's food or whatever he needs, the Banjo always runs out.
Love the name.
Yeah, well, we were going to call him Bandit because he's a little bandit. He was always stealing food from the Little Caesars pizza dough.
Yeah, he was always taking stuff, and then we decided it was nice, but we just went with a different direction.
Banjo, yeah, and he's a cool little dude, man. I'll tell you what, we're blessed. We have the coolest cat who thinks he's a dog, and then we have my wife's little dog that rode in the car all the way from California. Didn't poop or pee, didn't bark, didn't do nothing. Just laid there and slept the whole trip, and got out to use the bathroom when we stopped, and then we could eat, and she would stay in the vehicle. We left her in the hotel room at one point, and she just stayed in there, and she didn't bark. She didn't do anything. She's a real good dog. So we were blessed.
That is a good dog. That's a great dog.
Very blessed. My
Lhasa Apso would howl his little head off if we ever did that.
Yeah. And so we were blessed. I mean, we had all these dogs at one point, and, unfortunately, my little Chihuahua, she passed away last summer, and I'm still like mourning her. She was her name was Sweet Pea, and I got her from my mom when she moved. She went to stay in a place where she couldn't have dogs, and so took her in about 8 years ago, and it was heart wrenching when she passed. And so, I mean, she never barked, little Chihuahua that never barked. But I love dogs. But that's a connection there between dogs and people, and it's like you almost build a bond. My favorite dog I ever had was named Ivan, and he was a Mastiff. Now get this, I had him for 16 years. They don't live to be that old, but he was a big dog, right. 130 pounds, and he lived that long. That's a long time for a Mastiff.
It is.
And that dog was my right arm. I mean, some people broke into my house, I think in 1999, and he literally tore one of them's arm off.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the guy after that happened, he ended up getting in trouble or whatever, and I'm thinking, he's going to go to jail with one arm.
Well, not to one up you, but my little Grendel, the Lhasa Apso, got credit for bringing down a meth-crazed burglar in my son's apartment in Chicago when Nate was living in Chicago, and he had an elf suit on at the time. And this guy had broken in, kicked in the door of the downstairs apartment, and was making his way up the stairs. There were several apartments on each floor. Nate was at the top, and he got up to the floor where Nate had his apartment, and his friend Matt was in the next one, and they woke up and somehow managed to push the guy down the steps partly on his back, and then Grendel, dressed in his little elf costume because it was real close to Christmas, his little green hat and shirt, leaped and landed on the chest of this guy and snarled at him and kept him subdued. And the police were running up from the lower part, and they saw Grendel sitting and snarling on the chest of this big guy and just burst out laughing. And it was.
And his name is Grendel from Beowulf, right?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
man, that's a cool name, man. Oh, my God. That's cool. How old is this dog now? Like, do you still have it?
Yeah, he's like 12. He kind of goes back. He's sort of torn in his affections. He goes back and forth between me and Nate. So we take turns with him.
Oh, that's cool. That's good. That's real
but
cool.
that's why if you happen to go look for my film, Return to Wildcat Mountain, you'll see we called our production company White Lhasa Studios.
Oh.
Because we've had 2 of those now. The first one was named a girl named Tundra.
Oh, that's a cool name. I have a Tundra truck.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Okay, folks, that's going to do it for tonight. We're going to be back with Linda for the second part of this interview next Friday. Tune in at 8 p.m. Central on YouTube or any other platform that you may choose to listen to us on. We're on several. And for all you listening out there, thank you and good night.